Are you an aspiring writer who struggles with adding depth to your stories without being too direct or preachy? A speculative fiction writer who wants to ensure their themes resonate with real-world issues without overshadowing the narrative? Someone who wants to tackle social or political issues without alienating the audience? Or even someone who just wants to convey complex ideas quickly and efficiently due to time constraints within a format, like playwrights or short story writers? If so, this is the video for you, as I'm going to share what I know on how to use Allegory. For those who aren't familiar with Allegory, it's a narrative technique in which characters, events, and details within a story can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning. I went into its benefits in greater detail in a past video, so if you want to hear more on the why, give that one a look. In this one, we're going to focus on the how. I have 10 suggestions for you to consider when making your own stories, starting with 1. Identify core themes. Before you start writing, decide on the real-world themes or issues you want to explore through your allegory. These could range from social justice issues to personal struggles. Knowing your themes in advance will help guide the development of your plot and characters. If you need help finding your theme, I recommend looking at whatever your protagonist is struggling with. 2. Choose symbols wisely. Select elements in your story that can naturally symbolize the themes you want to discuss. Speaking from personal experience, I use things like thrones and crowns because people connect that with concepts of power. 3. Develop dual meanings. Ensure that every allegorical element works on 2 levels, literal and metaphorical. This through functionality should enhance the story rather than confuse the readers. To show what I mean here, I'll point to Return of the Jedi's climactic duel between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. It's not just a physical confrontation. It's a moral and psychological one. On the literal side, it's a fight between father and son. Symbolically, for Luke, it's a battle with oneself between succumbing to negative emotions, fear, anger, hatred, and staying true to one's belief in things like compassion, mercy, and love. Palpatine's presence tries to tempt things along to those negative emotions, while Luke ultimately chooses to reject him and place faith in his father having noble traits still, despite everything he's done. 4. Have symbolic settings and atmosphere. Craft your settings and atmosphere to reflect the themes of your allegory. Using Star Wars again, Tatooine can symbolize isolation and barrenness, reflecting Luke's own feelings of being stuck and longing for something greater. The Death Star can symbolize the Empire's oppressive power and technological hubris. Its cold, metallic, and impersonal interior can reflect the dehumanizing nature of totalitarian regimes. Or for another cold example, Hoth can symbolize the cold realities of war and resistance. My favorite to point to is Mustafar's fiery environment mirroring the rage and turmoil inside of Anakin. 5. Use characters as vessels. Characters can be powerful vessels for allegory. Their desires, conflicts, and growth can mirror real-world challenges. Ensure their personal journeys reflect the broader themes you want to address. One of my favorite examples to point to is Hody Jones in One Piece, the antagonist of the Fishman Island arc. What I think is one of the most meaningful details is that his backstory doesn't involve anything bad having ever happened to him. He just heard a bunch of horror stories from someone who is bitter and carried on their baggage, which led to him making destructive choices. Given how often I see this stuff online nowadays in spheres such as dating or race relations, I find it deeply meaningful. It's honestly something that makes me think about my own actions quite a bit and why I do my best to do things here like, well, good example, why I don't do the whole caustic critic act here on YouTube. I easily could, but I don't want to pass on that treatment or inspire others to become that, even if it would likely help me reach my goals more easily. And speaking of said goals, if you find what I do here on this channel helpful, I thank you to do stuff like press the like button, leave comments, and, if you can afford to, join the channel membership. 6. Incorporate complexity. Just like real-world issues, avoid presenting the allegorical elements as black and white. Including complexity and nuance helps reflect the true nature of most real-world situations. A good example I can point to is with the early writing in the X-Men. Despite what some would have you think, the X-Men wasn't formed to fight against mutant oppression. Quite the opposite. It was formed to face mutants who would use their powers to oppress, who thought their status as being different means that they could do whatever they want. Magneto was a mutant supremacist who acted as if his powers and status made him entitled to certain things. This, in turn, inspired some of the resistance to mutants, though they weren't viewed in the right either. There were plenty who were more open and curious about mutant-kind, alongside those who were fearful. Then add in Magneto's own experiences as a Holocaust survivor, which was a detail added 2 decades into his existence as a character, and we get that greater complexity which has been built into the series. 7. Integrate allegory gradually. Begin with subtle hints and gradually layer in more allegorical elements as the story progresses. This method allows the reader to grow more invested in the narrative before confronting them with deeper themes, making the revelation of allegory more impactful. Going back to One Piece, despite the fact that the story is so deeply philosophical, the political ideas and so forth aren't explored out of the gate. The story just starts with the story of a boy named Monkey D. Luffy who wants to be king of the pirates. Everything else is elements that are progressively integrated in as the world journey plays out. 8. Use historical and cultural allusions. Incorporate allusions to historical events, myths, and cultural stories that parallel the allegory you're developing. These references can enrich the story's background and provide a familiar touchstone for readers to connect with the allegorical elements, like how Godzilla's origins are deeply rooted in Japan's post-World War II anxieties. He's a direct allusion to the horrors of nuclear war and the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He symbolizes the destructive power of atomic energy and its long-lasting repercussions on nature and humanity. 9. Create parallel plot lines. Create plots that mirror each other in theme, but differ in context or outcome. This technique can be used to draw allegorical parallels between characters or events, highlighting your central message through the difference and similarities in how the plot resolves. For example, in Final Fantasy X, we get parallel pilgrimages, with the main story focusing on Yuna and her trip with her guardians, and the past plotline focused on Yuna's father, Braska. Throughout their pilgrimage, both parties start with a strong belief in the teachings of Yevon, which dictate that a summoner must sacrifice himself to temporarily defeat sin. However, for Yuna and her guardians, there are revelations and realizations that challenge these beliefs. This, plus the character of Auron's involvement in both journeys, leads to them ultimately seeking a way to break the cycle permanently. 10. End with reflection. You can conclude the story in a way that encourages reflection on the allegorical elements. This could be through an open ending, a meaningful quote, or a character realization that invites readers to think deeper about the underlying messages. One of my absolute favorite examples of this comes from something cut out of Assassin's Creed 3's ending reflection, but included within the book Forsaken. In the story, Connor's idealism clashes with his father's cynicism. Haytham views ideals as naive and impractical, believing that his son's adherence to Assassin's principles will ultimately lead to disappointment and failure. Connor, however, remains committed to his beliefs despite the challenges and sacrifices he faces. In the end, where Connor reflects on the outcome of the American Revolution, his experiences reaffirm the complexities and imperfections of reality. Yet, he still rejects Haytham's cynicism. This moment is significant as it underscores Connor's resilience and his connection to his ideals, despite acknowledging the pain and the imperfect outcomes of his actions. His end speech serves as a poignant reflection on his journey and the ongoing struggle between these two philosophies. By understanding and utilizing these techniques, you can transform your story from simple narratives into rich, layered allegories that resonate deeply with your audience. I hope you can come up with some ways to apply this, which, if you can, I'd love to hear about your examples in the comments. In fact, I have to ask, what are some of your favorite allegorical stories? Share them in the comments below, and let's discuss what makes them so compelling.